to modify their content as they go. And doc types are one of the biggest tools to do that. You set a nice doc type, so that way they have great ways to edit their content without losing their minds. We're not using templates though, because remember, we're not using Umbraco to render anything. We're just using it to hold the information, edit the information, and send it out. It's basically a glorified database administration at this point. However, one big problem that can occur with JavaScript frameworks is that they can have a heavy front load. You're not going to see anything on the site until you're finished loading the JavaScript library that's doing the rendering, finished loading the template in it, finished loading the content that's coming through for an API, and then there you go. And that's not necessarily very long. I can do it in 12 seconds. But as we've described, you don't have 12 seconds. You're going to have like 4 seconds. So sometimes it's much better to have, say, a template for your home page or your first page, so you can have that content being pre-done on the back end and sent out for the first thing. It's kind of a static first boost. I don't know if anyone's made a tool for it in Angular, but I know both React and Ember now have something that can take this kind of information, including that first client-side render, and it'll actually form it server-side, and then just boost it straight up. So it's basically like, you know, in the case of React, Pete's going to talk about this later. I'm really excited to hear about it. You'll basically pre-render the React view in .NET, and send it up, and then it just kicks live as soon as it goes up. And so that helps with that first load speed bump. After that, once we have the templates in, we're usually seeing much quicker response time just using an API. But you want to give the viewer something to see as soon as possible. So a homepage template of some sort we might want to use. Okay, and this is Umbraco. Haven't seen it before. So you know, adding a document type, you know, it's just basic. I mean, you know, we're setting up properties that represent stuff. I'm just using our example of the Umbraco logo. And so, you know, it's got the name, description, background, body, head, horns, mullet, pause, tail. I say that a lot in this talk. And just properties that we're adding. So we're still setting it up the way we would anything else. The catch is we're not doing a template. That's it. But since we're not doing a template, this is a lot of code. Don't get scared. Eventually, I'm going to have something on GitHub that you can download. That'll be like an example of the site telling the principles and practices. So don't have to write this, I promise. I see taking notes. And this is an example of what an API call then may look like inside that controller that we built for, say, getting an Umbraco. We're using examine. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment to get the information instead of content service. And then we're getting the information out of it, and then we're building our model so that we're passing in data that's consistent with what Angular is going to expect on the other end. So instead of templates, we're just doing this for all the different API calls, for all the different pieces of information that you may need them from. I popped this out so we can take a closer look at it. As you can see, we're using the examine manager, using that. We have a search that we might have built out to get the content instead of using content service. In the master class, did you guys use examine at all during the level 2? Yeah. Did they show you how to do it with content service as well? Yeah. So there's reasons you may want to use content service sometimes, but examine, it is great. I'm going to get to that in just a second, apparently. This is just an example of, say, the property. You want to grab it, and how you want to make sure to send it as the type that you need. But again, this is something that you guys probably covered in some form or another in class. And it's something you'll use a lot for this kind of methodology. Going to the content, getting the property you need, sending it out. This is how I do it. There's probably like 10 ways to do it. Now, the reason that we're using examine as much as possible instead of content service really just comes down to speed. Okay, content service searches at the database level. So anytime you're asking Umbraco for a piece of information, it's like, great, I'm going to go get that. Puts on the mining hat, jumps down in a hole, digs it out of the database, and comes crawling back out. I've been recently working with Heather Floyd at Mindfly on a new version of Ulocate, which is like a geolocation tool for Umbraco, stores a bunch of location databases. And that database gets pretty big, pretty quick. And so when you're digging for that information, it's slow. Really slow. Really slow. People are going to go get a latte, come back, it's not done slow. So you don't want to do that if you don't have to. Examine searches at the cache level. So this is all being cached much higher up. So it just goes up, says, oh, I have it right here on the shelf, pulls it out. It's not always going to be accurate under certain circumstances, certain edge cases. So you have to be careful when you're using it, that you don't over-rely on things that might be getting changed, say, deeper, but for whatever reason aren't being refreshed in the cache. But for most typical uses, I haven't encountered any problems with it. I don't know if anyone here who does much more cool stuff than me has, but I know there are workarounds if you encounter that problem. So that said, all examine is there for is to fetch from the cache. So we still need to use content service for creating information, updating information, or deleting. It still has to go and talk to the database to do those things. But we want to use examine whenever possible with this methodology when we're reading instead, because it's a zillion times faster. Because ultimately it's about more speed. Awkwardest dog running. Have you ever seen one of those guys run in real life? Just all the loose fur and skin, it's just all over it. It's so cute. But then they trip on their ear. Sad. Okay. Oh gosh, this is huge. I don't remember the slide. Let's go with it. Oh, this is an example of writing. I wanted to show you just a quick example of tiny text of what posting might look like. So here we do want to use the content service, and we are using that. We're just setting the values on the node that we're creating, and then we're using save and publish with status to update it. And I want to just emphasize that, save and publish with status. I bring that up because I think there's a save and publish, which is older, which there's some problems if you use that to update information. So you want to instead use save and publish with status. It's just a little tip for everyone that. I've made that mistake a few times before. It's had funny results. Okay, Angular side. So we have our content being put in Umbraco. We have built an API controller that is capable of sending that information or receiving information. On the front end side, we need something that can handle that. So we have here an example controller that might be responsible for a view. And that controller is initializing, and as it's initializing, it's pulling up information about an Umbraco that you want to look at. Oh, no, one make. Umbraco you want to make. And so this is a function that you might call in that controller. This might not be the best way to do it, we're going to pretend. And where you're grabbing a model, you want to take that information that's being passed, you want to rebuild it so it's going to look exactly like it, and then create a promise with that API endpoint, which we have, and then do something with it. For example, like send it, and then if we get a response, we may want to say, okay, it's successful, or we might want to say it's not. And we've got some stuff down below in Angular to attach this controller to our application. But again, that's a lot of code. We don't have to worry about it. If we look at it a little closer, this is an example of posting with it. So again, this is just a function that we're referencing an API service that we built to communicate with that backend. Simple, tiny, tiny's good. And then inside that API service, we're going to be rendering out a little more example of what this might look like. So here we've got the factory or service. They're basically interchangeable in Angular. That describes, gets the model, and then it's going to feed that via the URL that we have created with our controller in Umbraco. And it's going to get a response back, and it might say, okay. I've got a little thing here. I've got this down case properties tools thing. One of the problems that happens, do I reference it here? I'll reference it in a moment. Yeah. One of the problems that can occur when you're making an API to communicate between Umbraco and Angular, running .NET backend in Angular, is a matter of casing. JavaScript variable names tend to be camel cased with a lower first case, right? Whereas for, big dog, little dog. So whereas Umbraco, oftentimes you'll have names that are capital cased to start. And this is a problem for JavaScript. JavaScript is incredibly stupid when it comes to understanding variable names. So if you have something that's like little dog with a little L versus little dog with a big L, it doesn't know the difference. It thinks they're two different variables, sets them both up, we're good, which has bad results. Umbraco doesn't care. That's a honey guy. Is that me old? This is dating me now? So Umbraco doesn't care in the API. If you send the API back up and you're doing camel casing with lowercase letters first and it's got uppercase and it's modeled elsewhere, it automatically converts it. It's good. But if we're sending it back down to, back down to the front end isn't going to know. So you're going to need to have a function that will convert those property names to what is being expected of JavaScript. And you can have something that just downcases it. I don't have an example of the code, I believe, in front of me, but Pete Duncanson was telling me that he now has a nifty little single line can do it function. So ask him about that if you've ever encountered that problem. ng route. We're going to be including ng route. I don't know why I put this slide here. That's for routing. Since we're handling the views, oh wow, mine has fun.
So,
Holy cow.
yeah.
How much time do I have? 0. Awesome. Hold on, guys. We're going to go really fast now. Ready? Okay, we're almost done. I promise. So ng route we're going to talk about in a moment. That's an example of something that we send into the application that we built on the front end. Before we do that, we're going to look at goats real quick. Sometimes I get really upset about nomenclature between ng dash and data ng dash. It's just a thing. Doesn't even really matter. Other than the fact that data dash, you know what I'm talking about, properties, custom properties for HTML elements, guys. Technically speaking, put data dash from it, it'll be safe. There's never going to be any conflict. If you do ng, in theory, it's not future-proof. This is a very quick thing, I'm sorry, we don't have enough time to cover it. And I just wanted that go with sunglasses, so I didn't take the slide out. And then I was also talking about how some things aren't future-proof. ng dash as a property name, not future-proof. Mullets, not future-proof. Look at that, terrifying. All right, guys, I'm going to go fast now. Brief reverse history, Mullets Part 2. This is less important, so there we go. This is what we're now at. This is 2014, Mullets. We've fallen far. This is what people with Mullets drive. 1994, this was Mullets. Country music. Billy Ray, Soulfly. 1985, this was Mullets. The guy with paper clips. Right? It's like we go backwards, quality is improving. 1970s, David Bowie. Awesome. Now, I thought this was the birth of the mullet. I was wrong. This guy, he may seem to have fallen far from this guy, but he might actually have more in common with the 5th century. Fun fact. Eastern Roman Empire, Emperor Justinian, those who were rebelling against the empire, the rebels, if you will, would, according to a historian, they revolutionized the style of wearing their hair. Revolutionized. They cut it differently, clipping the hair short in the front and letting it hang down in great length in the back. That was the birth of the mullet. Or as they like to call it, the Hunnic style. So you're going to blame Attila the Hun for that. So a bunch of those guys running at you as barbarians. I don't know if they had a mustache. Okay, that's the end of the mini presentation. We're almost done this way. All right, route provider. I talked about it earlier a moment ago. If you're using Angular to handle views, you might as well use Angular to handle the routing, you know, the pathing. This guy sets it up for you. It's just a thing you can include. There we go. See that slide? I knew I had a purpose for it. That's how you would attach it to your application, to your Angular app. And then you can use it with this really convenient little thing where you're like, okay, if they have this URL, do this cool thing. Go to this template, load this controller. And then you can have that, if they don't, redirect it to one of these URLs. I swear this is really important. And then you can have ways to even include parameters in there with really convenient little name spacing, sort of stuff like that. And you can look this all up in your documentation, which is really friendly. Angular documentation is pretty scary, actually. And then you can, this is slide 4. We're going to go back to Daryl. Okay, super fast, Daryl. So, we talked about Umbraco on the back end. Doc types, models, API controllers. Do that. Angular on the front end. Views. Route provider for stuff like that. Controllers. We still need those. HTTP for API. Gotta have the API for Dell Sweet. That's my time. Thank you, everyone. Sorry about that. I think we're late for something, so okay with it. Yeah, really? That quick? Yeah. All right, so we were originally going to have 2 presentations. Heather Floyd couldn't make it, so we're all here for NFL Operations. It's a site review study. It's by Shola and Matt. It's going to be great. So we're going to give them a few minutes to set up. Sorry, guys.